I'm out here at the lake today with my mini MORRVAIR, the Matt's Off-Road Recovery MORRVAIR wagon. I think it's a Lakewood. Don't remember the year. I believe it's a 63 is what they have, but I'd have to double check that. This body, I got the STL files on cults3d.com, and I printed it in 3 parts. There's a seam here, goes all the way down. There's another seam here you can see. Then next I glued them together. I just did a quick tack along the seams, then used some accelerant to hold it together, and then inside I put a whiter bead. I've taken quite a few tumbles with it, but also I did it on another rig that I had to do the same thing, and that one I've really beat up pretty good, and none of the glues are breaking at all, and the body's holding up solid. Very happy with it. I found some Krylon Fusion paint. That seems to work very well. For the gray, it's actually an automotive vinyl wrap. And you can see it's not very good. I'll give you an example here. Here's part of the seam, and it wasn't completely lined up, but that wrap really brings it out. And then in this area, I could not get the wrap to stay down in there very good at all, even, I don't know, try as I might. I'm not very artistic. So you can see it looks pretty, I'll just say gross. It looks pretty gross. I did since then find a different gray paint from Krylon Fusion again. So I'm going to try that. I had done one wrap before, and it did not have near this steep of an angle in it. So it went much better. But I did learn on that first wrap to use knife tape. It's basically a thin line of tape with some filament in the middle of it. And you lay down that tape first, and then you apply your wrap, and they leave an overlap, like even up to the roof. And then once your wrap is on, you pull that filament loose from the tape, and you pull it across, and it cuts the vinyl right in half. I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube videos you could watch on that. Anyway, like I said, I probably won't wrap this one again. I intend to use the paint I found that is a close match. I also took a chrome pen here and did on the mirror and the door handles and so on. Very happy with that. I'm working on another build, so I've already printed out the parts again for the body, and I've glued them and done some sanding, but instead of trying to fill in the gaps with glue like I did here, and it didn't work very well, I'm using the Tamiya putty, and that stuff works really well. You're able to apply it, it sets up very quickly, and then you can sand very quickly, then build it up if you have to. Inside you can see I'm using magnets for mounting. I originally started with 4, it wasn't enough, so now I'm up to 6, and we'll see how that goes. Anyway, it is just so much fun to watch this thing crawl because it looks so much like Matt's Off-Road Recovery, which is one of my very favorite YouTube channels. On the next body I'm building, I'll put in some lights, or at least some lenses and things like that, and I'll see if I can get some windows in there. I'd love to find a driver, paint him up like Matt, maybe a little dog like Peanut with his head out the window. I'd love to do that. We'll see if that's something I'm able to do. In the meantime, I have this I can drive around and enjoy, and then I'll do the better build a little later on. I've always considered this my practice build. I don't feel a bit bad if it gets beat up or scarred. The other one will be more of a better looking build, I would sure hope. To get the body mounted, I had to get a little creative. I'm not an experienced CAD designer, but I used Fusion 360, and that seems to do the job for me. And then I'll take it, put it on the printer. So I had to design these mounts. Basically, you screw it on with one screw, and there's kind of a ridge that fits in the frame rail, and it holds pretty solid. So the mounts are also the shock mounts and body mount. The top piece comes off. There's a little screw that you can use to hold it in. So I have a screw hole on either side. Once I feel like I'm happy with those, I'll put them out on Thingiverse in case somebody else would like to use them. The back is basically the same design, it's just that the mount is made taller. What's nice is if you print a tall mount, it's just a little too tall, you can take a hobby knife and just cut a little bit of the end off of the support here. That's down inside. Shorten it just a bit and you can get it lined up right where you want it. You can see I used the stock SCX24 chassis. This is the Gladiator version, but not a lot else looks about the same. I do have a metal transmission, metal gears for the SCX24, and then the Mofo RC mount and the slow motion pancake. I absolutely love the slow motion pancake because it is so quiet. I don't like the sound of gear noise or motor noise. I just prefer a quiet so I can hear the tires scratching against the rocks, and this does it for me. I'm very pleased. Now, beyond the transmission, I've actually using FMS FCX24 portal axles. Reason I do that is I can get a lot of wheel speed that way. It'll slow crawl with that slow motion pancake, but the wheel speed, these axles turn at approximately 3 times the rate of the SCX24 axles. And I'm just very happy with them. It's easy to find brass for them. There's enough aftermarket parts to weight things. I don't have much for brass on this other than the brass hub carriers. I had snapped one, and so I replaced it with that. Just got an Emax servo on there right now, but I'll probably put either the FMS servo on there or maybe an OGRC like I have. Since I'm using the stock chassis, you can see though that things aren't mounted in their stock location for the stock chassis. I wanted the battery up front and also as low as possible, so I designed and printed a tiny little battery mount, and it just sits between the chassis rails, and then I used some double-sided tape to hold it on, and then some rubber bands just to add a little strength to it. Have had no trouble doing that. The receiver and speed control tray is also something I've designed. It's actually a little bigger than I needed, so I might just print another one and shrink it up just to get it as minimal as possible. Those things, the receiver tray and the battery tray, are also probably something I will put on Thingiverse when I feel like I'm happy with them. I went with a 3S battery, but with the axle speed I get with these FMS axles, I could probably do 2S just fine. But I've got plenty of 3S batteries, so I'm just sticking with that. I had mentioned that if you want to cut down the body mounts to get it the right height just right, it's easy to do by just doing some trimming. And I'll show you, I feel like I got it right up here on the rear wheel to where it's just touching, and I think that's perfect. The front wheel has a little more clearance, mainly because when you turn you're gonna touch there. I really don't notice that much, but it does touch a little bit, and touches a little bit in the back. I knew I wanted the Milestar Patagonia tires on here because that's what Matt uses on his rigs, and even though there's a little rubbing, the clearance is pretty good. Now, as far as your typical crawlers go for RC, this is definitely not a top crawler as far as, especially breakover. You can see I've got such a long wheelbase and small tires, so the breakover is not so much. But really, I think it's more of a scale build for me, though I'm not very good at it. But it's just a fun build that I wanted to have and enjoy watching it crawl while I run around. Every crawler's fun if you can push it right up to its limitations and know what its limitations are. And that's how I feel about it anyway. This thing will crawl very slowly. You can see it's barely moving. You have to look pretty close. Forgot to mention there's a Furatech Lizard speed control in there, just a basic Lizard, not the Pro. And if I want some wheel speed, it's got it. I'm very, very happy with the range of speed I get out of this. I can crawl Take it nice and slow. If I want to, I can jump it. I know Matt's done that with his. So I've got to do it with my little toy. I have the endpoint adjustment set to where it'll just touch when I turn, especially up on the front. But it's not terrible. I had a little rubbing at first. As I turned, the wrap was sticking out a little bit. I just trimmed the wrap off. I really built this to be more of a scale driver that I can enjoy watching. And I'll build it even more scale on my second build. So, won't be doing any comps with this. That is just fine. That's the MORRVAIR.